Welcome to tonight's program with Inforum at the Commonwealth Club. I'm Mina Harris. I'm head of strategy and leadership at Uber and also the founder of the Phenomenal Woman Action Campaign. And it is my great pleasure to be in conversation with San Francisco's mayor, London Breed. So you ready to get started?
I'm ready.
All right, you guys ready? Yeah. All right. So I think a lot of people in this room know your public profile as mayor, right? And what I love about conversational settings like this is it really lets people get to know my good friend, London, and get to know you a little bit better. So I really want to kind of start at the beginning of your journey growing up in San Francisco. And I know that your grandmother, like mine, was a really big influence on your life and a big inspiration for you. And you know, someone who gave you tough love when you needed it.
Yes.
Can you just talk about that relationship and what she meant to you?
Well, believe it or not, I was somewhat of a difficult child. My grandmother raised me, and I felt like I was being disciplined every single day. But she really supported me. She encouraged me. She really was very blunt. She was honest about what was going on in our community, but she also made it clear that our responsibility is to really take care of one another. And so she did a lot for folks in the community. My grandmother wasn't the most affectionate person, but she was very giving. She would always cook. She would always give folks food. And I would say things like, "Mama, why are we giving away? We don't have much." And she's like, "Be quiet. That's what you do for people. This is what we're supposed to do." And never went into detail and explained it. But then I found myself later in life when I started working in the community doing some of the same things that my grandmother did in terms of discipline and telling kids to behave, but also making sure that I was feeding them and working with them and having conversations. And so, it was a very challenging environment, really challenging with my family too, and the dynamics in my family, and having family members in and out of the criminal justice system, having family members and friends who were killed, and going to funerals on a regular basis, and just the drugs and the violence and just all of the things that it entailed. And in fact, the public housing development that I lived in, especially people know Plaza East and the Pink Palace in that area, folks would never come to this part of the city because it was really challenging. And so I grew up in the midst of that, but I think that's what really gave me the strength to do a job like this because I'm really fortunate that I had so many great people, including my teachers, including counselors, including places where I worked, who really supported me and encouraged me. And I'm here today because so many people invested in me, and I didn't really understand at the time how valuable that was or what was really going on. And this is why what I do is so important. This is why Opportunities for All, a program that I started where we're going to make sure that every high school student has a paid internship here in San Francisco. This is why that's so important to me, is providing an opportunity for young people to grow and to thrive no matter where they come from. So that really shapes how I make policy here in San Francisco. And it was tough, but I made it through, and here I am as mayor of one of the best cities in the world, and it really is an honor and something that I don't take for granted. Every single day, I know that it's a blessing to be in a position like this, and with that comes an incredible responsibility to do good with this position.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love that, she was really a part of giving you that sense of community and duty, right? And also teaching you and showing you what kind of future you could have through community. And you talk about that being so central to even your being encouraged to go to college, right? This community that you had all around you, despite the challenges, that you were still encouraged to succeed and to, get out of that. And I have a fun sort of when we were young memories, which is that I think we were at some fundraiser, and one of our friends had just graduated from law school, and I was on my way to law school, and you were like, "Dang, everybody's going to law school. I need to go to law school." And, of course, you went on to get a master's in public administration, and you stayed in San Francisco and continued to be in this community. But like back then you had no idea, right, that you would become the first Black female mayor of San Francisco and the second mayor in San Francisco's history, right?
I mean, I know I didn't. I wasn't even thinking about running for office. At that time, as you know, I was working in the community. I was working at a nonprofit agency, the African American Art and Culture Complex. I was on the Redevelopment Agency Commission. I knew that being actively engaged in politics in some capacity is really a way to help change policy and make things better for the community that I grew up in. And during that time, we were dealing with some of the worst violence in our city's history, where a number of homicides, I mean, they were happening in the Western Addition, in the Bayview, mostly in the Mission, but especially in the Western Addition. And the crazy part about this is I grew up in this neighborhood where, sadly, so many of my friends were getting killed, but then this was their children. And it was very, for me, in thinking about even law school, is just really thinking about, well, I'm working in the community, I'm working with folks in the community, but what can I do more? And part of it was wanting to educate myself about the laws, educate myself about policy, educate myself about ways in which I can really make a serious impact on the neighborhood and change things for the better. And so ultimately, I was like, I don't want to really be a lawyer, so I don't think I'm going to go to law school. So why not? The next best thing, I went and got my master's in public administration at USF, and it just really was a great experience and just helped push me, I think, in the right direction. I decided I want to run for supervisor because the opportunity presented itself, and I wanted to, number one, have access to the city's budget to make changes and to cut waste so that we can invest city resources in a more effective and efficient way that serve people better. And also I wanted to change policies, and I wanted a seat at the table so that some of the policies that we've made in the past and still are making, sadly, have unintended consequences. And I wanted to have a seat at the table to put my perspective on the table for the purposes of developing better policy. So here I am. But it wasn't as if I thought this was going to happen.
Can we go back to that moment, by the way, when you first ran? Because you were the director of the African American Art and Culture Complex, right? So you were already in the community, working with youth in the community. But the moment when you decided to run was not an easy one, right? And an easy path. And you were typically, as a lot of women are told, as it turns out, and women of color, it's not your turn. Wait your turn, it's not your time, right? And made it nothing comes easily, but it was challenging. Can you talk about that experience?
Well, folks might remember, the District 5 supervisor, Ross Mercarimi, became sheriff, and then Ed Lee was mayor, and he had an opportunity to appoint someone, and he didn't appoint me, and I had to make the hard decision. I just couldn't sit back because I just felt really strongly that if he had appointed someone I thought was someone I could work with and someone who would focus on the things that I cared about and understood those things, then I would have been supportive, but I didn't feel that way. And so I ran against that person. And in fact, it was a very tough campaign because, I didn't have a lot of support. The only person that actually was an elected official that supported me was Kamala Harris when she was the Attorney General, your aunt. So she went with me to pull papers, and I had all the community folks from all the different neighborhoods, but a lot of elected officials and other leaders and other organizations, they weren't supportive. And so I just went about my business, knocked on doors, talked to constituents, and I didn't give up. And I focused on the work, and I focused on talking about me, and here we go. I mean, it was really amazing. And when I won that night, I thought, whoa, I won. This is crazy. I mean, I think that about every election. I'm just like, whoa, is this really happening? It is
Yeah.
happening. And it's like, wow, this is incredible.
Right, and here we are. Well, to put this in context, I think about the fact that we are seeing history made not only here in San Francisco, but across the country, right? We're in this moment where so many women are stepping up into leadership roles and leading in their communities and running for office, and many of them for the first time, right? And they're winning, and it's just an incredible moment we're witnessing. But as I'm sure you know, as is the case for women and women of color especially, it's not always easy being the first or the only, right? And it
Yeah.
can be lonely. It can be a lot of pressure. How have you navigated that, being often in these circumstances the first or the only? And where do you draw support and strength in those tough moments?
Well, it can be lonely, and especially because there's still so many challenges that exist with my family and my friends, and here I am, mayor of San Francisco, and I definitely want better for them, which is why I'm pushing for changes to policies and equity and other things that we're focused on. And my strength comes from, a higher power. Like I'm a spiritual person, and I know that's not popular to talk about when you are in elected office, but I'm a spiritual person, and I pray and I ask God to give me the strength to, make the right decisions and do the right thing, and give me guidance and support around, these very tough decisions. And then I have a lot of really close friends that are my great network people that I can call on for advice and counsel, and just some amazing people, some positive people, strong folks who just really are there for me, and that has really been very helpful. What's also great about being in a position like this, what I love is when I'm out in the community and someone comes up to me and says, I'm rooting for you. I believe in you. I know you're going to make San Francisco better. Like that really gives me strength too, because they're excited about, what we're going to be able to do to change things in San Francisco, because we know that we have a lot of challenges that need to be addressed. And so I get strength from just really being out, especially in the neighborhoods, and also the work that we do, and just someone who we get housing for, and people will walk up to you in tears, like even today where we opened 83 new units of family affordable housing, and 50% of those units went to formerly homeless families.
Yep.
I mean, and I announced that today, during that time, is right next door, because of the windfall money that the city received, we're going to build another 250 units. 100% of those 250 units will go to homeless individuals. And it's like that gives me life, just to know that we are making the right investments, and those investments have a real impact on somebody's life. Because I grew up in poverty. I grew up, in a situation where, we didn't have heat most of the time. We didn't even have a shower. This is over 20 years of my life. We never had a shower where I lived. And the conditions, of where I lived were just conditions that, no one should have to live in. And so when you've had to live like that, I wasn't homeless,
Right.
but, I've had to live in the kinds of conditions that, it's still in my head to this day. I'm reminded every time I think about, like, when you've had to live like that for over 20 years of your life, and then, people are living like that, or people are sleeping on the streets, then there's nothing that's going to be more important than trying to figure out a solution to that. And so, there's so many things, and this is just an incredible time, and it's something that I truly enjoy.
Well, and it speaks to the fact that your life experience informs your decision making and your leadership, in part because you understand personally the impact that this has on real lives, right? This isn't just sort of a policy question.
Yes.
You understand the impact on real lives. And I'm curious, economic justice is a big issue for you, and building on what you just talked about and the circumstances in which you grew up in, how does that life experience inform your view on economic justice?
I think everything. Last year we were able to get legislation passed to eliminate fines and fees, and actually our late public defender Jeff Adachi was a leader in this particular effort because what happens when someone does a crime and they unfortunately, there's restitution, so this does not remove restitution if there's money owed, but the courts have all these layers of fees for your ankle monitor, your social this, your services that, your court fees, and all of these fees. And what would happen at the African American Art and Culture Complex, because I would, sometimes hire people who had served time, folks I know, made a mistake, want a second chance, give them a second chance. After a few paychecks, all of a sudden you're getting a letter to garnish their wages for these things. And then, you have this, young man upset and mad and saying, I don't even want to work. I should go back out there and sell dope. And, you just think like, no, you don't want to like break somebody, right? So those kinds of experiences, like living and knowing what people are going through just to try and get their lives together, and then what they choose to do when they feel like the system constantly financially beats them down for so many different reasons, it's something that I know we need to address. And so we've been doing it with the city, with the fines and fees, and before when I was on the board, reducing the fees for commissary and for phone calls and tow fees and all of these things that sadly have a really horrible impact on poor people and their ability to, just survive in general. And so I think about those things because I think about, what I had to endure. I mean, my grandmother and our phone bills for my brothers collect calls from jail and how, like our phone would get cut off on a regular basis because she couldn't pay it. But then there's other families who would put their phones in other people's names and, just all of those things I think about when trying to make changes to policies because it just sets you back and it sets you back and it sets you back. And you're like, when are we ever going to get ahead?
Right.
When are we ever going to be in a situation where, life is okay? I don't need to be wealthy, but I just want things to be okay. And so I think about, just all of my experiences and how policy can play such a critical role in really changing that. And then also the right financial investments can play a critical role in helping to really change someone's life as well.
And it's the point that, we're seeing this in the bail reform conversation as well, that we're finally having at a national level, right? But that these fees add up and these families it's something like, $400 away from catastrophe. And if you're paying that out in fines and court fees, you're done.
And then what it does for your credit too.
Exactly.
If for example, you're paying a bail bondsman and all of a sudden, you stop paying and then the collection fees and then it goes on your credit. I mean, it's a never ending cycle.
Right. And San Francisco, in fact, is the first city, right, to implement this. And it's now being replicated across the country. So San Francisco has always been a leader on a lot of this stuff. But can you talk about the process too to get that, legislation passed and to get political support to actually make that happen?
Yeah, well, part of, how I approach doing legislation is probably different than some folks. Some folks have come up with an idea and then all of a sudden they're like, we're going to tax everybody for this, or we're going to, charge a fee for that. And so what I decided to do, because I wanted to make sure that we understood it. So there was a task force, of course. There were all the different city departments, the sheriff's department, juvenile probation, the public defender, the treasurer. We brought everyone that touched this issue to the table to have a conversation, to gather the data, and to get a better understanding. And then also to talk to some people who paid the fees and some people who were struggling to pay the fees. And we discovered that, basically of all of these fees, about 21,000 people owed millions of dollars, and we weren't even collecting like 15% of these fees. And just the amount of money we were spending on process was just ridiculous. It was just money down the drain. And so gathering that data and showing that, it's better to just really not include this because it's also not helping. It's not doing anything to help someone get back on their feet and do well in life. It's in fact in stopping that. So the process was really about the data, the conversations, bringing everyone to the table, folks who care about this particular issue, and then crafting the right piece of legislation that would help address this particular issue. So it was definitely a process, and a successful one at that, which brought so many people together for something that folks are just really happy about.
So homelessness, moving on to
Lord.
other policy issues. It's no secret that San Francisco, like many cities, is struggling with homelessness. And you mentioned this earlier, but you're working to add more shelter beds and to build more supportive housing. But a lot of these challenges also seem to be around mental health and drug abuse, right? What is the city doing to address that specifically?
So, it's you're right, a very complicated problem and difficult to help people sometimes who are struggling with mental illness and substance use disorder. In fact, I've been really focused on trying to look at mental health differently in San Francisco, where we really shine a lens on this particular issue, and we try and push through policies that are going to help us help those individuals. I am hiring a director of mental health reform that will serve under the Department of Public Health, so that we can develop a comprehensive system under one umbrella to really try and address what we know is a crisis. In fact, oftentimes, sadly, people who use meth, the psychosis that's brought on because of that drug use sometimes is not always reversible. And it's like a lot of stuff going on where we're talking about the issue, we know what the data says, we know what the problem is, but we have no real solutions. And so part of what I'm pushing for, and again, it's somewhat controversial, but strengthening our conservatorship laws so that we are able, for someone who can't make decisions for themselves, we are able to, through the courts, provide a guardian that will make decisions for them, whether it's their family members or whether it's someone from the city and county of San Francisco. And in some instances, this would require someone to be committed to one of our mental health stabilization beds. And in fact, we've been able, since I've taken office, to open 100 new mental health stabilization beds, and we're going to open another 50 this year for the purposes of trying to get people help, trying to get them treatment, trying to get them the wraparound support that they need. And the controversy here, of course, is people feel like, well, why are, people have rights. And I understand that people have rights. This is really, not about trying to take away their rights, but I'm not blind. I see everything everyone else sees out on the streets with people who are struggling. And we are basically cycling them in and out of our jails. We're cycling them in and out of our hospitals. And that's not a public health solution. And so Senator Scott Wiener got one bill passed that's, not as effective as we would have liked it to have been. So he's introducing amendments to change it, to make it stronger, so that our laws here locally, that we're able to strengthen our conservatorship programs, open more mental health stabilization beds. But more importantly, it's time that we really shine a light on mental health reform in general, because when you talk about when someone gets sick, right, you break a leg or you get hurt, or you're diagnosed, and there are ways to treat that. But something happens where someone has dementia, someone is schizophrenic. There are medications and things, but what does our health system do in terms of providing the support for those who may not have family members who can help support and take care of them? And so we got to start planning for the future, and mental health reform is something that's really important to me, and looking at what's happening around those struggling with mental health here in San Francisco, and the solution similar to how we look at those who are struggling with physical health issues. So reforming that is something I deeply care about, and really trying to, change, how we address that particular issue is important. As far as the drug use, it's a real challenge. We have, with a lot of the drug dealing, and this is again controversial, but this is what it is. We sent people out to try and talk to people to say, hey, we are prepared to work with you to help you get employment, but we're not going to continue to allow you to sell drugs out openly on the streets. And so we've been doing a lot of that, and then the police come in and we make it clear if someone takes us up on our offer, we will help them and support them and work through our various jobs programs, because we have so many incredible opportunities for people to work in this city. But if folks are going to choose to be out there openly dealing drugs, we have to arrest people for breaking the law. And it's controversial, but the police are arresting them. They're not necessarily being held accountable. They're not necessarily being prosecuted, which is another problem. I'm happy to give someone a second chance, but there has to be consequences. And right now, people are coming to San Francisco and openly dealing drugs, and we can't continue to allow that to happen.
Can you talk about another aspect of that crisis, though, which is drug use?
Yes.
As well, right? And that being done openly on the streets?
And part of, and we've been cracking down on that in particular, but part of, what I talk about is safe injection sites as a possible solution, because we're not going to be able to stop everyone from getting access to drugs. And just because we don't want to see it doesn't mean that it's just going to disappear and go away. And safe injection sites are really a way to, from my perspective, get the needles off the streets, get the people from using off the streets. But more importantly, if someone who is struggling with substance use disorder, and when they say, I need help, you have to help them on the spot. You have to get them into treatment right then and there. And so we're talking about an environment where most likely someone who is struggling with addiction is going to ask for treatment. I tell, the story sometimes of my sister and how she would, be in the Tenderloin, and she'll call us and she'll call Collect and she'll say, come help her. And by the time, one of us get down to the Tenderloin, we can't find her, we're looking for her. And, it's so difficult. And especially when you have a family member, and it's not an easy thing to go through, and we have to make it easier for people to get into treatment. We have to provide more easier access to treatment. Just recently, I ran into somebody I've known my whole life who was like, London, I'm ready for help. I need some help. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I got to get him help. And before I can turn around, he's gone, right? So people have to have places that they know they can go when they decide that, hey, I'm ready for some help. And so I'm looking at all possibilities. It's not going to be one thing that solves this issue. It's a real challenge, throughout the United States. And so I'm open to looking at places. I visited Vancouver, Canada, where I saw firsthand, both before and after photos, and I couldn't even believe when I looked down this one alley. It was worse than anything I've even seen in San Francisco. And what they've been able to do, where they have had zero overdose deaths in their facility, where they've been able to refer thousands of people to detox who have not come back through the system. And yes, they've had people come back through the system, but for the most part, the fact that they have detox right upstairs, and they are ready for folks, and they're meeting them where they are, and they're bringing it indoors, and the needles that used to be everywhere are not out as much. Just some of the things that they've been able to do, and they have not solved the issue, but it's a lot better than it was before. So when they started, and they did polling, about less than 30% people supported the idea of doing a safe injection site. And then after they were open, I think for 18 months or so, over 70% of the people that they surveyed supported them and was happy and felt like it was making a difference. And so I just think I get it. I was absolutely no when I first heard about them. I'm like, no way. Why would we do that? Why would we make it convenient for people to shoot up and to use drugs? And just, seeing what it's been able to do, knowing that people struggle with addiction, and they struggle with alcoholism. People struggle with certain things. We have to have solutions for people to meet them where they are when they are struggling.
Well, I think, it's interesting, and this is my perspective being in the tech community as well, that we know that this is about real lives and the human condition, right? But nevertheless, people are frustrated. They are so frustrated. And I think part of that comes from, seeing someone on the street suffering and not knowing what to do. Yeah. And I think, all of us in this room are thinking, what can ordinary people like us do when we see this in that moment, right? How can we respond? How can we help in a way that feels like it's actually making a difference?
And I'm frustrated too. And so I would ask anyone to call 311. And the fact is, I get it that sometimes you will call 311 and you may be on hold for some time, but also that person might be gone by the time someone from the homeless outreach team comes. And so what we try to do, because what we noticed, we have this system called One System where we have an organized, coordinated entry system. We also have, a new team of folks who are working together out of our 911 center with our police department, our homeless outreach team, the Department of Public Health, DPW, and we have, where we know there are real challenges in specific areas, we have this targeted approach for specific neighborhoods where we are probably most likely are familiar with the person that you're calling for. So it's very helpful to us because we're trying to make sure that we track people and we try to get them help, and we can't force, as you know, anyone into a shelter or into support. But I will tell you that by being aggressive and being out there and having those conversations and trying to work with people, some folks, after years of trying to work with them, have taken us up on our offer. In fact, you don't see those large tent encampments like you used to. Since I've been in office, we've gotten almost 1,000 people off the streets. Wow. And that was really tough. I mean, I've gone out there myself, of course, as some of you might know. I walk the streets, I've talked to people, I'm tracking the folks that I'm meeting, that I'm trying to get into the, shelter system, which is why we've added another 338 shelter beds, because we know that some people are, struggling, and so a shelter bed just to get someone off the streets is really critical to have, so that we can meet people where they are. But I would say that to the ordinary, like somebody who's just walking and you want to help, call 311. Report it if you can and if you have the time, because it does help us. Even if we get there and they're gone, it helps us to track where we know people are, so that we can really provide efforts to address this issue. And that, again, is not a solution, but we are working really hard to try and help some people, one person at a time, because it is really, I mean, I can tell you so many stories about so many people, and what I'm also finding, what I'm also learning by being out there and having the direct conversations, a lot of the folks who I'm meeting, are not necessarily people who come from San Francisco. They tell me their story about why they came here, and it's heartbreaking, but San Francisco alone can't bear really the burden of solving the homeless crises for the entire country. Mm-hmm. We need help. Close to 24% of the homeless people throughout the United States are here in the state of California, and we need we need support. We need help. We need a bigger vision, and more folks who are added to this conversation, because we are spending a lot of money to help a lot of people. And for every, this is what Jeff Kaczynski, who's the director of homelessness and supportive services here in San Francisco, for every 50 people we house a week, we have like 65 people to take their place. Mm-hmm. And that is not going to solve the issue. So we have to have partnerships and we have to work on a larger scale, but we're going to continue to chip away at doing everything we can, including adding what I'm pushing for 1,000 new shelter beds by 2020, pushing for building more housing, more affordable housing for low, moderate, and middle income residents.
And how do you view that? I mean, in terms of the intersection with homelessness and the housing crisis.
So the right now, I mean, between 2010 and 2015, when we were pushing for jobs, 8 jobs for every 1 unit of housing. And people have been getting squeezed out, not just here in San Francisco, but the entire Bay Area. The economy is thriving, it's growing. We have so many requests for commercial office space, and also we have underbuilt. We haven't built enough housing to accommodate that growth. So that's part of the challenge, which makes, affordable housing, more higher in demand than ever before. And so I think the direct connection is, just making sure that we have the stock, that we have places for people to go, places for people to live that they can afford. And so I'm pushing a really aggressive housing agenda, getting rid of the bureaucratic red tape that stops housing. I mean, the 83 units that we open today, the nonprofit developer that they identified that site 11 years ago, and then it took 5 years to get it done. It's like, no, it shouldn't happen like that. So I'm also taking a charter amendment to the ballot where 100% affordable housing and 100% teacher housing can get built as of right if it fits within the codes and the zonings, no upzoning, no anything, but they're just doing it by what the law says that should happen as a right without all the drama that comes with stopping projects. And so it's important, it's critical. Having safe, affordable places for people to live is critical to addressing this issue as well.
So to shift the focus a little bit to the national stage where there's just a little bit of frustration as well. How do you view San Francisco's role in that conversation, right? I think we talked about San Francisco being the first city in the country to eliminate court fines and fees. And I like to think that we are a leader nationally, right? There's the saying, as California goes, so goes the nation. I think it should be as San Francisco goes, so goes the nation. Do we have a special responsibility in terms of our progressive leadership on a lot of these issues? And how do you view that?
Yeah, and I do think we have a responsibility because, we're willing to take risk. So, for example, same-sex marriage and what happened to the rest of the country. It was absolutely amazing, and it happened here in San Francisco first. We said, you know what, we're just going to open the doors. This is what we're going to do. And so many other things started right here in San Francisco, and I think that when I went to the U.S. Conference of Mayors for the first time, what was so interesting is meeting all these mayors who were telling me all these things that they were doing in their cities because of San Francisco. Mm-hmm. And they were saying, oh yeah, we're doing neighborhood preference, and I know New York did neighborhood preference first, but no other city was doing neighborhood preference where 40% of all the new affordable housing goes to the people who live in that particular district first, because folks were being pushed out of their neighborhoods. And so now everyone's asking, how did you do it? How can we do it? Things like that. And I think, we're willing to take risk. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to take risks to try and figure out ways in which things can get done. But also things like, fines and fees. That's an issue around economic justice. And just doing these kinds of things really, it's not about trying to put San Francisco on the map, but it's really about, trying to make sure that we are leading the way and setting the tone for, what should happen throughout the rest of the country, because you go other places. It's not like San Francisco. So many other places are struggling, with pushing forward policies. Like there's states that we don't even go to or we don't spend our money in because of their policies against LGBT folks. And so I think that, we got a long way to go. And I think we've been setting an example for a really long time, and we will continue to do just that. And the whole purpose is to make sure that life is, of course, better for our residents, but we want, things to be better throughout the entire country as well.
Totally. Yeah. And I think being a San Franciscan, I have a lot of pride in what you said, which is that, it's in our DNA, right? Yeah. We are innovators, we are creative thinkers, we are problem solvers. We are going to do that no matter what, but it's about also understanding the responsibility that comes with the leadership inherent in that, right? And having leaders like you who are taking it to other places and making sure that people know about the good work that we're doing.
And people are like, wow, San Francisco did this. Wow, San Francisco did that. And really, like, it's so interesting. They're like, wow, they elected you mayor, and it was like, whoa, like, because people know that, we have a very low, less than 6% African American population, and they're like, wow, that's amazing. Like when you go outside of San Francisco, people are always like, they have talked about the challenges with homelessness, but some of these other places are dealing with their own challenges, but they think we have such a beautiful city. We're doing great innovative policies, and, they feel like they can stand up too, because we're not willing to be, pushed around, by anyone, or especially, not the president. And it's like, I say that because, one of the things that I've had to do was really fight for our funding for the Caltrain electrification project, where they awarded us the grant. He came into office and immediately, tried to take the money away after the federal government committed to giving to, the Bay Area. And this was about transportation in the Bay Area. And sadly, we had to reach out to those, Republican states to say, look, this is job opportunities for your constituents, and their constituents start calling them, and then we got our money back. But it's like, we're citizens of the United States too, and we're not going to be bullied and let someone try and take away something that was committed to us. And we're just trying to really make sure that San Francisco is a better city, and that the federal government makes its appropriate investments in our city and in our economy, because we pay our taxes and we deserve it. Mm-hmm. So I didn't want to make this about the president. I'm sorry, but I
didn't utter his name intentionally. So we have, 5 minutes, and you're approaching your first full year as mayor. And what are your, we talked a lot about policy and, sort of your journey, but what have been your reflections so far? And no pressure, but if you were able to do everything you want to do while you're in office, what will San Francisco look like in 10 years? What is your vision?
I'm hoping it'll look like this in a few years, not 10. But, the first thing that I really wanted to make sure that we didn't have these large tent encampments in San Francisco. So set out for that particular goal. Civic Center Plaza, and, where the parks are, and the front yard of City Hall. I wanted to clean that up and make it a better place. Ultimately, what I want to see is a cleaner San Francisco. And I want to see a San Francisco where we don't have anyone who is homeless, where we have a place to take someone if they are homeless. And so I want it to be a cleaner, a greener San Francisco, a more equitable city where opportunities exist for everyone. I want this to be a city when you walk down the street and you're going to a show or you're going somewhere to enjoy yourself, you're like, man, I love this city, and that was a great meal. And that's really what I want to see. I work every day to try and, just accomplish something that, makes people feel better about the city. And this problem that exists here is not unique to San Francisco, and it's not something that I believe we're going to be able to address overnight. But again, I celebrate the small things. I celebrate the small victories, because all those small things are going to add up. And then we're going to look back and think, wow, do you remember last year when all those tents were lining up on DuBose and 13th in that area? I still see some challenges there, but it's not what it used to be. Mm-hmm. Wow, remember when I didn't like walking through Civic Center and my car would get broken into? Well, that probably is not happening anymore for the most part. You know, like just the things that used to happen, I want those things to go away, because when someone comes to San Francisco, or someone goes to see a show, or goes shopping, or goes about your life or what have you, or just trying to get on public transportation to and from home and work, I want those experiences to be good. That is what I want to happen for the future of San Francisco. And, every day the decisions that I make are towards that goal.
So we're gonna do some Q&A, if you're up for that. We have I knew this going into this, we have a pretty sophisticated audience here, so some good questions. The first one is about cannabis equity. Do you think the Cannabis Equity Program, which gives preferential treatment to nonviolent drug offenders, is working? And if so, why is the community, why is a community hurt the most by marijuana, the non-white community receiving the lowest number of cannabis business licenses?
I don't think it's working, and I think part of it is, in order to open a cannabis business in San Francisco, especially if you don't have one now, it's really expensive, and the process is very challenging. And so we're going to be hiring a new person to run this office, and the focus is, how are we going to make it work? How are we going to make sure that, because we had anticipated there was a tax, and we wanted to use the tax to help support more equity around cannabis, and it's not a lot of money that's going to do much of anything. And so I just think we may need to make some changes to our policies in order to address what we know is something that isn't working. And it's okay. It's okay that it's not working, because but it's better that we're aware of that so that we can fix it. Because that's why we hired someone new who we're hoping will lead the way and help make it work.
So the next question is about school. It starts with hello, happy face. San Francisco has one of the highest percentages of private school attendance. What are you going to do to boost the appeal of San Francisco public schools?
So I went to public school, and I made it through, thank goodness. And I think that it's really challenging, because our public school system operates independently. We have a school superintendent, and we have elected members of the school board. And unfortunately, oftentimes people do use the school board as a way to elevate themselves into public office, into other positions. And yes, it's not popular probably for someone to say that, but it's the truth. And I think that even though some of those folks who serve on the school board, do a great job and are well-intended, I want more people on the school board who really care about success, and care about the kids, and care about making the right investments so that all kids in our public school systems are successful. So I hired a policy advisor for education, and when there was an opening on the school board, I appointed her to that particular seat, not necessarily to push my agenda, but to push an agenda around equity and working with our school systems, and how we can get into really making real reforms that are going to help close the achievement gap, and make our schools better. Because we have some great public schools, but not all of them, everyone wants to go to Lowell, and probably, I went to Galileo, okay, that's like the best high school in San Francisco. But, we have some great schools, and I do think that it's important that we work with our superintendent, who I meet with every month, and we have a board where we're all getting together with a number of department heads in order to make real change and the right kinds of investments in our school system, to make our schools a lot better. But it is very challenging. I don't necessarily control the school district, but I make it clear what my desires are, and that I want to be a partner with the superintendent on changes to policies, to make sure that our public schools are better, especially around, like I said, the achievement gap, which is a real challenge. Willie Brown Middle School, where there is a serious challenge of young people who have need of, mental health support because of challenges and trauma and things that they sadly have seen and faced in their neighborhoods and at home. And I really want to make sure that we have mental health experts who are part of that school, that we really start to look at how do we target the places that we know are challenging and make even more investments, like through the money that we provide, the City and County of San Francisco, through the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. How do we redirect those dollars to make the right investments so that we're really targeting and supporting kids in our public school systems? And so it's something I'm definitely committed to, because I don't know where I'd be without our public school system, but I also saw too many of the people I grew up with drop out of school and end up in the criminal justice system. And unless we make the right investments now, we're going to see that cycle continue to repeat itself. So we got a lot of work to do, and I'm definitely committed to working with our superintendent and the school district to try and accomplish it.
And what about, the lottery system? I'm a mother of 2 kids, and we're looking at schools now, and I feel like it's, the perspective is just opt out. There's also like myths about it, and people are just like, I don't want to deal with it. People who are privileged to say that, right? And they just sort of, in theory, yes, we need to fix the public education system, but like, oh, not my kid.
Yeah.
So what's your perspective on that?
Well, my perspective, I am not a fan of sending kids all across the city to go to school. I walked to elementary. I went to Rosa Parks, which was called Raphael. I walked to Ben Franklin Middle School, and it was always a group of us walking to school together. We caught the bus when I went to high school, and I think that creates really a stronger, more resilient community when you are able to grow up going to the same schools together. And I do think that needs to change. And so part of what I'm looking at, again, is the data and working with our city attorney's office to figure out, what we can do, whether or not we need to go to the ballot. How does this work with the state and federal laws? What can we do to change it? Now, some people may not agree with it because they think, well, some schools are better than others. And if, for example, only the kids who live near Lowell can go to Lowell, that might be a problem. But that's really what our charge is to do a better job of investing in our schools so that they all are on the same page. And it's not just, this is not college. This is like high school. This is junior high. This is elementary school. And I do think that we need to do better in terms of our investments in making our schools better. But I don't agree with, taking kids all over the, all over the place to get to school in our city. And I do think we need to change that.
Mm-hmm. So moving on to the next question, which is about challenges that you may have had and that you have articulated really detailed plans for how to address some of San Francisco's most difficult issues. Since taking office, what has been a lot tougher than you expected? And do you plan to adjust your approach to that issue or those issues? And if so, how?
Okay, so tougher. It's been tough repeating myself over and over again to sometimes bureaucrats. It's frustrating. And I will say that I'm very impatient, so waiting for something to happen is something that is hard for me because I just don't understand sometimes why, especially if I'm the mayor and I ask you and I want it done now. So one of the things, I shouldn't even tell you guys I did this, but I was so mad about a pothole one time. And I had a little bit of time, so I had, we pulled over and I waited. I called and yelled at 3 people to come and fix it, and because it was dangerous. And I'm just like, how could we allow this stuff to happen? And I get that, but I based on how it looked, it had been like that probably a really long time, and no one did anything about it. And so
I'm like, did you fill the pothole yourself?
I didn't fill it myself.
What happened?
No, I didn't fill it myself. I just got out and waited till someone showed up to, like basically block it off, and we needed to deal with it. And I think, trying to change behavior has been hard because from my perspective, everything is urgent, right? Whether it's a pothole, whether it's helping someone get off the streets, whether it's a mattress or trash. I mean, all I do all day, a lot of times, is I'm in the car texting people where to go and what to do. And I also make sure I take that route back to make sure that it's fixed on my way back. And I'm obsessed with that.
Which is, by the way, part of what it means to be a mayor. I mean, right?
my
keeping track of this stuff.
But the thing is, I just didn't think it would be so hard sometimes to get people to do what you ask them to do. And honestly, sadly, it's what their job is to do, especially because of how much money we spend. And I get upset, and I say it every time I'm yelling at someone about how much money we're spending on your department, and this should not be a problem, and this should be fixed, and this needs to get done. And people are saying, well, you need to be nicer. And I'm trying to be nicer. I am trying to be nice. I'm trying to be nice, but I'm impatient. And
Miss Brown, tough love coming out, right?
well, the other thing is we lived in public housing, but we had to sweep the porch. We had to put the hot water with the soap and sweep the porch and clean up the grass in front of our house. Like, we had a responsibility to keep our community clean, and that's how Ms. Brown raised me. And it happened when I was at the African American Art and Culture Complex. The kids, they cleaned up, they took care of the place, they took a lot of pride. And I think part of it is I want people to feel proud of the city. I want them to take pride in the city and feel responsible for it. And so, I mean, I did that in my district, but my district is one thing. Now I'm like citywide, and it's like now it's like I can't even keep track with it. And so it's always meetings and conversations and, where's the beat officers? Where's the clean team? Where's the this? Where's the that? Where are they? I want to know where they are right now because of how much money we spend. And, we need to see results. I need to know what is going on. And I just didn't think it would be so difficult sometimes to get the results that I feel should just happen naturally without me spending so much time on these issues.
Mm-hmm. So I'm happy someone asked this question because I would have asked it, and we touched on it a little bit regarding homelessness and what ordinary people can do. And the question is, how can the average citizen make a positive impact on this city on the micro scale?
Ooh, let's see. Oh, goodness. Well, make sure you clean up after yourself. Don't throw any trash on the ground. I think part of it is getting involved in various capacities. There's boards, there's commissions, there's nonprofit organizations that are doing great work. So when I was in the Western Addition community, for example, we had this program called Mo Magic. And what was so amazing about this is all the nonprofit agencies that serve children, and we were like partners. But we had, these people who, this person was responsible for the backpack giveaway. This person was responsible for the health fair. A lot of volunteers, a lot of people who were actively engaged and took ownership of these various things that we would host and do in the neighborhoods, and they made life so easy. And it made such a difference for the community. So I think there are various ways, depending on what your interests are, to get actively engaged, whether it's boards, commissions, organizations, and just really investing your time into that organization and the relationships. Because the other thing is, those folks who have been working with us in the community for so long, their kids grew up with the kids in the neighborhood, and they're all mostly adults now, and those relationships still exist. And it's ultimately what I'm hoping to do is to create a better San Francisco through communities. And that is really important. And I think getting involved means getting involved in your community in some capacity or something that you're really passionate about.
Well, when you say that too, I mean, it makes me think of, that's what I think of as old San Francisco and the San Francisco I grew up in, where you knew somebody's auntie and the cousin and the, you know,
Yes.
there was a real connectivity. And what I hear in both of these responses is also that we need to get back to that sense of community. And part of what we as individuals can be doing in our neighborhoods or wherever it may be in our workplaces is building that, right?
Yeah.
And it starts with relationships. I was really struck by when we were talking about homelessness, you said, we know who those folks are, right? When the rest of us are walking down the street, I doubt anyone thinks like, oh, I know that person. I know their name. I know where they live. I know where they came from. So you as mayor, you through the government, you have these relationships, right? These institutional relationships, but there's a lot that we as the public and as citizens can be doing to help bolster that.
Yeah, and I think we are also consumed with like technology nowadays and our phones. And there used to be a time where people would just talk to each other. And I think that's changed. And I do think we need to get back to some basics here because when you know the folks in your neighborhood, when you're actively engaged in various communities, that's how relationships form. That's how the help that people need happens. And that's how I've been able to, there was one guy in particular in my, not in my neighborhood, but my district when I was supervisor. He was, going through a really tough time and clearly something was going on, mentally, and all the neighbors knew him. All the neighbors kind of contacted me and we were able to get in and to help him and, help him transition into a facility so that he could be cared for. And it was a process and it was because of the neighbors. And he is exactly the kind of person who unfortunately could have ended up homeless because he didn't have any family. But the neighborhood really looked out for him. And so I just think that a lot of things can be avoided by making sure that there's a connection to people in San Francisco in some capacity and getting involved, just like you did earlier where you had to say hi and introduce yourself to someone you didn't know. Those are the kinds of things that are really going to help make our city better, I believe. And that's how I've met so many amazing people, is boards or commissions or volunteering and doing things. And it's pretty cool.
I think about that, and even just it's an easy thing that each of us can do in our daily lives, right?
Yeah.
And I find myself, in many ways, I think it's almost modeling it for my kids, but getting off the phone when I'm running. Yes, I may have an Uber waiting for me outside while I'm grabbing coffee, but like get off the phone. Do you know the name of the barista? Does your kid know, right? And just engaging more. And it's an easy thing to do, but you have to be actively thinking about it and committing to it and showing up, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So the next question is about collaboration and business, and it is, what is or are the multi-sector collaborations you're most excited about, and what industries have the biggest responsibility in addressing the most challenging issues such as housing?
So I'm most excited about the collaboration with a number of companies here in San Francisco and our Opportunities for All, as I mentioned earlier. Opportunities for All is my commitment to ensure that every high school student in San Francisco has access to a paid internship. So many companies have rose to the occasion with not only contributions to help fund those internships, but also their willingness to take on high school students. And so I'm pretty excited about that because this opens the doors of opportunity for young kids to learn about all of these incredible industries in San Francisco. My first job was, I babysat, I took people's groceries to their car, I did things like that. But I also got my first job at 14 working for through the mayor's youth employment and training program at a nonprofit agency. And I always tell people about how, like I said, I had challenges. And so I didn't necessarily dress appropriately for the work environment. I'd answer the phone like, hello, hello. no, London, that's not how you answer the phone. So it became, hello, this is London Bree. Thank you for calling the family school. So I had to change my tone. I had to change everything. But just imagine if I never had that opportunity. How would I know to do that? And I think we take that for granted because, you know, again, it goes back to my experience and working with young people and my environment and those kids not understanding or what it is to be in a professional environment. And so Opportunities for All is really about exposure. It's about us taking responsibility for everybody else's kids because we can't just think my kids, my kids, my kids. We have to take responsibility for all kids ultimately and make sure that we're making the right investments for their future. And so I'm excited about that. I think this program is going to be absolutely amazing. And don't worry, for those of you who want to take on the responsibility of working with a young high school person, we have training and other things for the most challenging of kids, and those are usually the best ones to work with. So that's something I'm most excited about.
Awesome. So this is the last question, and it's an Inforum tradition to ask all of our speakers this final question. What is your 60-second idea to make the world a better place?
Oh my God. Make the world a better place. I would say that the thing that I think is so important to equity is ensuring that everyone has a safe, affordable place to call home. I just feel like everyone deserves to have a roof over their head. And if we could make something like that happen throughout the world and make sure that people aren't without food, they aren't without a roof over their head, and they're able to live in a safe, affordable, clean place to call home, I think life would be good.
Mm-hmm. To close out, thank you, Mayor London Breed, for joining us tonight here at Inforum at the Commonwealth Club. I'm Mina Harris, and thank you to our audiences on the radio and listening at home, and I hope all of you have a great evening.
Thank you.